not exclusively, but it's for people that may be one of very few entrepreneurship people at your school. Some of you are in huge entrepreneurship departments, but some of you, may not be. And so part of getting T&P is also, defending being in entrepreneurship and what that means. I think, and in particular, your niche in that, because I think in a lot of schools, everybody would say that they were in entrepreneurship. And so, if you really feel that's something unique about you, it's probably worth thinking about. So, number one, and I'm going to come back to this, is that all schools are different. Every single one of your school has different criteria, and a really important thing when you arrive at a school is learning what's valued, because so I'm sort of giving some general comments, but it will definitely vary by school. So I've got, being in a business school, of course I have a 4-something model, and I've got the 4C model, and in the middle is categorization. So every person that looks at you for tenure, whether it's the internal committee that looks at you for tenure or whether it's an external person writing a letter for you, is going to try to categorize you. It's the way that we make sense of our world. And in entrepreneurship, we have really ambiguous, fuzzy boundaries. And so if you don't have people often just don't even know what that means. When you're harder to categorize, people get confused. You're not familiar. It's hard to make sense of what you do. And so it's really easy to get a negative assessment. But ambiguous categorization also presents opportunities, because if it's ambiguous, then they're not necessarily stereotyping you or putting you in a preset category. There's the option for you to be able to define the category, define what you do. So it's really important in your written dossiers to structure your story and make it visible. And things like diagrams or figures are just really effective. And these harken back to some themes that Peter and Sharon talked about earlier. The sort of the planned approach, but also the serendipity happens. But you don't want your CV at Tenure to be serendipitous. You don't want to see all these scattered things. Well, there's, I created this opportunity, or, this co-author came. You want it to see really, really cohesive. So the opportunity is that you can define that yourself. So given that, though, we live in a world that's increasingly measured. And everything we do in the academy, whether it's service, whether it's teaching, whether it's research, is measured on some kind of number. And the information from that's not necessarily accurate. It's certainly decontextualized, but those numbers have a big impact. And when people look at them, they can help them make sense of yours. So it's not just your story, but it's also how your story measures up to expectations. And there's lots of different ways you can do this. You may have something people on your T&P committee may not know the impact factors of the journals, some of the journals that you've published in. And so, so that would be something to tell them. Something I've seen people do is to, maybe your paper was the most downloaded paper in Journal X for the first 6 months of 2015 or whatever the year is. Say that those things stick with people. I know that sometimes the most well-cited papers are not from some of the top journals. They're just really good papers from other journals. So, make sure you put in citation count. So the general message is to look for where metrics can help you. You're not going to quantify everything, obviously, but a few metrics judiciously thrown in are good signals to help your story. So that's the second C. The third C is the contribution. Chances are in your T&P committee, everybody's not going to be in entrepreneurship, and they may or may not have it's an exciting field, but they may or may not have an understanding of it. And, I think it's probably good to avoid being seen in an entrepreneurship silo, if that's what your school would think of it as. And think about, what are the theoretical um, implications of the work that you're doing outside entrepreneurship, maybe to some areas that other people are more familiar with. So if you're doing something on networking, what can you show that is generally, interesting for people doing networking? I think a compliment, no, it's not a substitute. It might be a substitute in some schools, but is to show that your work has impact beyond the academy. And I think that can be a powerful thing too, that policymakers are listening to you, or that practitioners are listening to you, or that that you've got some kind of audience there. And that takes me to my fourth C, which is the community. As you develop your story, you're also developing, who is your community that you're talking to. In the last speaker, we talked about having conversations. And your scholarly community, is it the entrepreneurship division? Who is in that? That'll be who you draw on to write letters. I know at my school, when I came up for tenure, they had no idea who to write to, and I just said, write to anyone on the JBV editorial board, which is probably a really stupid thing to say, but I felt that defined the entrepreneurship field as I wanted it defined, as opposed to, say, in an economics journal, because those people I was not talking to. And so, think about who you want to do it. Certainly external assessments are super important when you're unknown, and when the field may be unknown. Those letters that come in are going to be really important. So it's not just constructing a story for your P&T committee, it's also constructing one for external people. And once you construct it, run it by people. Get suggestions on how you're probably going to have a 3 or 4 page statement of your research, and let people take a look at that and help you write that. That being a good citizen reduces unfamiliarity. We know that when somebody is more familiar with someone, that they tend to be more favorably inclined towards them. And so, doing things at the academy, doing things in your faculty, even though we all hate service, look for opportunities that aren't super time consuming, but that you can actually get to know people and get a network. Same with business and policy, making communities. I hesitate to say spend a lot of time there, but I'm someone who did spend some time there, and it was nice to be able to say in my dossier that somebody outside the university actually cared what I was doing. I think like all of those little signals when you're an uncertain entity only just serve as a signal to strengthen it. Also, the last point is that temporal judgments matter. And so, you hear the phrase, the rich get the rich, or the Matthew effect. And so it's nice sort of to hold, sometimes I think you should hold a couple of things back. So you submit your dossier and it's X. It looks pretty good, maybe, but you're always worried about it no matter what it looks like, aren't you? And then there's just a couple of other things that, even if it's like a conference paper or whatever that may be, because then, if people have a semi-favorable view, suddenly you're giving them just a little bit more that can help. And I think that temporality makes a difference. So, my number one point is learn what's valued at your school, and really think that you are in charge of constructing the story, and that's going to really affect how people view you.
Okay, it's a real honor to be here with you guys today and have a chance to speak with you, and it gives me a chance to reflect on my time in the academy early on. And one of the first doctoral consortia I went to, in which I was paired with Sharon Alvarez to read one of my papers, and the encouragement that she gave me and how helpful that was. So use this time, to network, but hopefully you'll be encouraged by the things that we're talking about today. And so, kind of to Sharon's opening comment, I'm not that smart, so I got to simplify things. So the easiest way for me to think about these topics is to think about it in terms of metaphors. So I think of tenure and promotion a little bit like climbing Everest. So we're going to use this as a little bit of a discussion point. So you've got this big mountain in front of you, right, that you know that you have to climb if you're going to stay in academia. And hopefully you're at a school that you are happy with, or whatever school you may move to, that you're going to be able to navigate climbing this mountain. But the problem is, it's not just climbing the mountain; it's on a clock, right? And we talk about the tenure clock, and the clock is ticking, and there's all this time pressure, and you only have, 6 years or 5 years to get your packet in, which really only gives you 4 years to get the stuff to journals because it takes so long to get through, And so by the time you get done having these conversations, you think, man, I'm not too sure if this is a great idea, right? So you think, well, we need a strategy, and that was kind of the topic about what we had here. And so, a lot of us study strategic management, or maybe teach strategic management. So the idea of having a strategy makes a lot of sense to us. And so we're gonna climb Everest, and we're gonna think of it in the ways that they do with the different camps. And so we've got to acclimate at the various altitudes. And so we set up our office. We learn the institutional norms a little bit. We find out where to get a parking sticker and where a place that I can park and all those kind of things. And we get settled in, and we start moving to Camp 1, research. That's what I've been doing as a doctoral student. I'm ready to go. I should have the stream of research moving, so I start moving along with that. And then there's the teaching component. Yes, you do some of that in your doctoral program, but now the pressure is really on, and you really have to have your stuff together. And teaching evaluations are critically important in the tenure evaluation process. And you have 18 to 21-year-old kids who are telling you what a good job you're doing or not, which is a little interesting. So you have to kind of work through that. And then this service component comes in. You probably won't have a lot of that as an assistant professor, but you may be asked to do, various things. And so you got to try to work that in. So we finally get to Camp 4, where we're ready to try to climb to the peak, and we have to submit this packet. It's all about building this packet and submitting our packet. So we put a strategy together. So now we're singularly focused, right? We know what to do. We're gonna move on this thing, and if it doesn't fall along that route, I'm not interested. I can't engage in that. This is my strategy. The only problem with that is that people die on Mount Everest, right? So if we go back to 1996, 12 people died on Everest. There were 2 competing companies, one led by Rob Hall, the other by Scott Fisher. These were some of the most experienced mountain guides. They had a financial incentive to get their clients to the top. A lot of their clients had paid upwards of $50,000 for them to climb Mount Everest. And the idea of not getting them to the top was not an option financially for their companies. So they made some bad decisions. They started going up late. They left later than they should have because of the weather. Most of the clients made it to the top. Almost none of them made it back down because they didn't have enough oxygen to make it back down. They got caught in a storm. So there's been a lot of stuff written about this, a lot of books. Jeff McMullen actually has a recent paper in JVV that ties into the Mount Everest disaster. But one of the things that Christopher Case talks about in this book is about how this is destructive goal pursuit, this single-minded vision and focus on a goal, how that can be destructive. And so if we just kind of take that concept and apply it to this tenure and promotion journey, if you will, there's a risk to strategizing, or what I would actually call over-strategizing. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a strategy or that you shouldn't approach it, in a thoughtful way. But what can happen, and what I've seen happen, is that people get so focused on top journal publications that that's all they care about. That's all their energy goes to. That's all they want to try to do. And yes, that's a priority, and it needs to be important to us. But you're focused on that, you miss out on opportunities for personal growth, engaging in a project that might be personally rewarding to you, something that you're interested in. In my own case, I did a book chapter with Dave Williams and Jennings that was one of the most influential things I've done in terms of my thinking overall. That, in terms of tenure, doesn't count for anything. But it was a really pivotal personal growth point, kind of in the trajectory of my career. You begin to sacrifice your authenticity. So should I position myself as strategy or entrepreneurship? What should I do? You should position yourself as you, right? Who are you? What are you interested in? I'm much more like Sharon. If somebody's going to interview me, hey, I'm an entrepreneurship guy, and if you don't want that, that's fine, but you don't hire me. So you really need to know who you are and what you're doing, so that when you go in, you just say, look, this is who I am, and if this isn't a fit here, it's okay. There's another place that it will be a fit. So, I think you should really be, authentic about that. Sacrificing your personal relationships. So, Peter, you want to go to lunch today? I can't, man. I'm top journal clubs. I don't got time for you, right? So, not being able to kind of engage in those things, and then forgetting why you became an academic. I'll let you in a little secret. I became an academic because I wanted to teach. I thought that would be cool, right? That I'd be able to interact with students, use my personal business experience. I owned a business for 15 years. I thought I'd be able to convey some of that experience. I'd be able to work with students. I still like that part of my job. It becomes less and less over time, unfortunately, how much I get to do it. But I like to do that. And, you got to think back, sometimes about why did I get into this originally? Because all these things will pull you in different directions, including the tenure process. So think about that a little bit. So I kind of advocate a little bit maybe of a different approach than just pure strategy. And that is, if you do the hard work, the results will come. I think if you talk to most people that have been successful at getting tenure, especially at the, at Research One universities, most of them I think would say the same thing. Yes, I cared about it. Yes, I worried about it. Yes, I was smart about it, but I didn't think about it on a daily basis. That's not what I did. I just did the work. So my advice to you is to be a person of action rather than talk. Don't be the person that comes into the faculty meeting and says, we should do this. Because when you do that, I'm thinking, when you say we, you must mean me, right? If you want to come in and say, we should do this, and here's what I'm willing to do to get that started, that's a different conversation. So be a person of action. Know your purpose and passion. Know what it is that drives you, what excites you, what you're interested in, what you're moving forward. Don't be pulled by other people's whims or some faculty member coming and saying, you really should do more strategy research. I would say, well, if you want to do more strategy research, you should do it. But that's not what I'm going to do. You should be really, confident in that. I would say be authentic again. Seek truth in research. We still are scientists with a capital S, as Peter talked about. That is still what we do. And you should be, pursuing that. And then the last things I would say is love your students and love your colleagues. And the way I think about how do I love my students and how do I love my colleagues is that I'm willing to inconvenience myself for them. So I'm in the middle of an R&R and a student comes to me and they are having a life crisis. That needs to be my priority, right? At the end of the day, the journal article is nice, but it's not going to matter to the impact that I can have on that person's life at that particular moment. So I would say be willing to inconvenience yourself for your students and for your colleagues. That doesn't mean sacrifice yourself. That's different. But inconvenience yourself when it makes sense to try to help those. And if you do that, you should be able to climb the mountain successfully, right? And navigate Everest and get tenure. I know in my own case, after getting tenure just a few years ago, because I moved from university to university, it took me a little bit longer, but a couple years ago, nothing's really changed. I feel the same as I did. I go to work the same. To me, it was almost a non-event, And so I think that's because if you approach it from this way of just kind of do the work and the results will follow, you'll feel the same way. You just, if anything, it just frees up, you for more service, which is not necessarily a good thing. So enjoy your time as an assistant professor. Seriously, enjoy it, relish it.
I was really inspired by Matt's tenure as a mountain climbing expedition analogy. So when I was putting my slides together, I thought I would play off that analogy a little bit. So as you can see from the title there, the big title is On the Power of a Small Hill Approach. So that'll be my first tip, and then I'll follow that up with 3 other kind of quirky tips in both the work and the home spheres. All right, so for the first tip, I have a little bit of a scenario for all of you. Again, playing off of Matt's here. So I want you to all pretend you're climbing a mountain for the very first time. Okay, so can everybody kind of envision what that would be like, how scary that would be? So if that's the case, all right, you're heading off, climbing your very first mountain. Which mountain would you prefer to climb for the very first time? Would you prefer one that looks like this? Or would you prefer a mountain maybe that looks like this one over here? Anyone for the first one? First time around? Climbing Mount Everest?
Well,
Matt.
I'm gonna have to say.
Yeah, come on. All right, so I'm going to assume that all the rest of you would opt the very first time that you want to climb a mountain that looks like this. Okay, I think that kind of ties in pretty nicely then with my very first quirky tip, which would be the following. You might want to consider a small hill approach or a small pond approach. So instead of trying to climb the big bad Mount Everest, maybe try to find a smaller hill or a smaller pond to climb for tenure. So when I was back in your situation back in 1999, I made this choice like very consciously. So at the time, I was at the University of Alberta, and so still there, I was facing a lot of pressure to play in the big pond of OT. All right, we're a big institutional theory school, right? And so my colleagues wanted me to be an institutionalist, lots of pressure. So I did a bit of soul searching, and I realized, you know what? Okay, that's a nice pond over there, that big pond. But I know for myself that I would feel much more comfortable in this small pond. And by that small pond, I don't even mean entrepreneurship more broadly. For me, that meant women's entrepreneurship. So my small pond was really quite deliberately very small, and I knew that that would be the pond in which I was going to be most comfortable, most authentic. The biggest advantage of a small pond approach or a small hill approach is there aren't that many fish who can fit in that little pond, right? So your work, if it's good quality, is going to get noticed much more easily. Not only that, you're going to get to know the other fish in that pond much more easily, and they're going to get to know you. And as a result, it's going to be much easier for you to secure the external people who are going to be writing letters on your behalf. They're going to actually know you as a person, not just have read your work. And that can be huge when it comes to putting your package together. All right, so that's the essence of my first quirky tip. That first one's in the work sphere. Because I was a women's entrepreneurship scholar, I became quite intrigued very early on in my career about the family embeddedness approach to entrepreneurship as well. So some of you might know me actually for that piece, the Aldridge and Cliff piece. So my second tip is actually going to be in the home sphere. All right, and this one is especially for all the ladies in the audience, all right? Especially for them, but I'll link it back to a more broader point for the men as well. So ladies especially, my tip in the home sphere for you would be find a partner who cooks, all right? Nice if he looks like that, but you know, whatever. All right, so what does that mean kind of more broadly and for the men in the group as well? What this image I'm trying to convey here is that in the home sphere, try to be thinking about, okay, what do I actually enjoy doing? And what do I not enjoy doing? So links, very much to some of Matt's comments, but in the home sphere as well. And so if you're the type of person in the home sphere, if you actually enjoy cooking, that's great, go for it. But if you're the type of person like myself, I cannot stand cooking, what I'd encourage you to do there is to kind of let go. Let go of kind of that superwoman, superman imagery. You know the one, right? You gotta be the perfect prof, the perfect spouse, the perfect parent. I'd encourage you to let go of that. And for the tasks that you can't stand doing, reach out. It's okay to say that you need help. Reach out to your partner, maybe even reach out to your kids. And I think you'd be genuinely quite surprised about the quality of help that they might actually be able to provide in the home sphere. All right, so that quirky tip number one in the home sphere. My second quirky tip in the home sphere would be the following. The tip's not there yet, just the image is there. So at around your stage, about 3 years into my tenure track, very challenging situation I had to deal with, a separation and a divorce. I had 2 kids at the time, so all of a sudden my schedule looked something like this. 1 week on with the kids, 1 week off, 1 week on, 1 week off. I obviously, missed my kids on the weeks that I didn't have them. But what I realized very quickly is, wow, is this ever liberating? Not to be wearing my mom hat underneath my prof hat all the time. So obviously I'm not standing up here advocating that all of you, hey, go out, get divorced. It's awesome for your productivity. Clearly not. What I'm encouraging you to think about is kind of parallel to this. Is there any way that you can build in minimizing the role transitions? So is there any way, in a week that perhaps you can carve out, again, negotiate with your partner to be wearing even just 1 day a week, even 2 days a week, just your prof hat. And on that day, if your partner can be the key go-to person for all things kid-related, household-related, I think you'll experience a huge benefit in terms of your productivity, your anxiety level, that type of thing. Okay, for those of you who are getting uncomfortable about all this, these tips in the home sphere, my final tip, yes, it will be back in the work sphere. And my tip here is the following: to find a powerful Yoda. All right? So for me, at your stage, I was really fortunate to find 3 very powerful Yodas: Royston Greenwood, Howard Aldridge, and Dev Jennings, who became my second husband. All right, so 3 powerful Yodas. Why are Yodas incredibly powerful? First of all, obviously they can help you in terms of figuring out what it really takes to get published in the top journals. I had no clue as a doctoral student what it really took. So my advice to you there would be, open up your data to your senior profs, invite them in. Don't feel, again, that you have to do this all on your own, okay? Your senior Yodas can be incredibly powerful in terms of helping you tell a better narrative with your data. What else are Yodas good for, powerful Yodas? They can be very good, back to Becky's point about helping you to understand what's valued at your school. And I guess I would argue as a conclusion, really powerful Yodas, I would say, can also help your school understand why they should value what you do, the type of research you do, even if that research that you do is only on a small little hill or a small little pond. Right, thanks.